Thank you, everybody. Sit down, please. Right, welcome everyone to Member Forum this afternoon. We'll just start quickly with some safety information. Should there be an evacuation, we need to leave through the main reception and congregate on College Green in front of the cathedral. Firstly, welcome back to the Council Chamber. It's good to see everyone back in this room again after 18 months' absence. Everyone is seated, hopefully 1 metre apart if you're in the seats with green ticks, and you are advised to wear masks in the room unless speaking or have a medical exemption. Full details of all of the questions submitted for Member Forum today, together with the Mayor's written replies, have been published on the Council's website. Questions have been submitted by groups in priority order and are presented and taken rotating around the party groups. Each councillor has asked up to 2 questions and has up to 2 supplementaries. If you've asked 1 question, you get 1 supplementary, and if you've asked 2 questions, you get 2 supplementaries. And I will advise you, as we call each person, which is the case. We will start with Labour question 1. Councillor Hume on Afghan refugees. You've asked 2 questions, Councillor Hume, so 2 supplementaries.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mayor, very much for your very detailed answer. And I'm very, very pleased to see that the refugees will be housed in Bristol. I just want to check with you that the resources that are being used to help these Afghan refugees, which obviously I really support and I think is absolutely fantastic, and it's excellent that we're doing so much for them. I want to check that those resources are not taking away resources from others in the city who are in need.
Well, they're not, which is one of the reasons we've gone to the private sector for housing, and it's been part of the very clear conversation we've had with government. We want to support people, but we do have to be careful of the politics. And there are opportunistic politicians who are ready to stitch together fears, concerns, and people's feelings of hopelessness and turn it into language and imagery that would create that kind of hostility. And we have to be aware that that kind of predatory politics is out there. We've also been blessed as a city to have received considerable donations, cash donations from individuals as well, that will go towards resourcing people when they get here. So I'm just being very frank here. When we talked about what people need, there will be goods that are donated, but there will be things that need to be bought new, like underwear and toiletries. And so the cash we have and maybe a little bit of reserve that we have on top will be there for those kind of situations and emergencies that may arise.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a second supplementary question?
No, that's all. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. In which case, we'll move to Green question 1. Councillor Plowden on Clean Air Zone. Again, Councillor Plowden, 2 questions, so 2 supplementaries.
Thank you for your answer to my previous question. I'm glad to see that you're endorsing low-traffic neighbourhoods and giving local councillors a role. As you know, this is a complex and technical task. What will you be doing to provide councillors and local residents with the necessary resources?
Councillor Plowden, sorry, it's quite difficult to hear. I know the microphone's quite a low level. Is there any chance you could get a little closer to it?
Okay.
Make it easier.
As you know, defining low-traffic neighbourhoods is a complex and technical task. It's good to see that you'll be giving local councillors a role to work with residents, but what will you be doing to provide councillors and local residents with the necessary resources to be able to see this through, and how soon can we expect this?
Well, that's all part of the rollout of the neighbourhoods. Engagement, conversation, collaborative action has to be key to a successful programme. We have seen in other parts, well, namely London, where schemes are implemented without collaboration with and without the cooperation of local communities. They may grab some headlines, but they don't necessarily stick around for very long. And it's one of the reasons on the Clean Air Zone, engagement with local people, anticipating the unintended consequences of good actions, and good actions, where if we take a mature view of the world, can have negative consequences for some groups of people. It's one of the reasons we have to make sure that we're thinking about all those dynamics before we press ahead with any such program, and that's what we're doing, so it'll be built in.
Thank you. I think I'm going to ask the question again. What will you be doing to provide councillors and local residents with the necessary resources, technical and expertise to be able to see this through, and how soon can we expect it?
Well, I'll give you the answer again. It's part of the programme to include local people and councillors in the scheme. And I think we've learnt a lot from some of the errors of our officers in the past who, in many ways, have left us with some of the transport challenges that we've been trying to deal with over the last 5 years, but I'm sure you'd be more than familiar with those kind of errors.
Thank you. We move to Conservative question 1 from Councillor Galandris on Council Garden waste collections. Councillor Galandris, you have 2 supplementaries.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Apologies, I'm not quite in the right seat, but my back has gone, so I'm having to sit on a hard chair at the back, so a bit of sympathy. Marvin, thank you very much for the answers. They're very helpful. If I could have a supplementary to question 1, the bin service, the green bin service has been suspended for 10 weeks. I know you share the disappointment. We're hoping it's going to be back on the 15th of September. Could I be slightly cheeky and say, do you think it is more likely or less likely that it will go back to normal on the 15th of September?
Well, I hope your back isn't too bad for too long. Okay, I think it's more likely rather than less likely. But we've experienced over the last year and a half, certainly, haven't we? We can be taken by surprise, and over the last few months, if you've shared, we've taken a particular hit that's taken a number of people by surprise as well. But more likely rather than less likely. But it's not impossible that something will come up and not that deadline.
Thanks, Marvin. Yes, let's hope we don't get another COVID spike or anything like that. Supplementary to question 2, thank you for agreeing to share the data. That'll be really helpful. Hopefully the data will be positive, and that's my gut feel. But if it isn't positive, what would be the next steps, do you think?
We're in the middle of having quite a energised, rigorous conversation within the council and with Bristol Waste. And that conversation extends to all the businesses involved in waste in the city about the city's relationship with waste. Anyway, you'd have heard of the Clean Streets campaign. We had lots of volunteers going out. We had the introduction of fines. But actually, the point we constantly made was that the Clean Streets campaign was only ever a gateway issue. I don't say only ever. Clean Streets is absolutely critical to quality of life and the rest of it. But it was a gateway into asking some broader questions about how we reduce the generation of waste in the first instance. Part of cleaning up a city is not just going out and cleaning up fly tips and picking up litter. It's making sure they're not there in the first instance. That's personal behaviours, but it's also the systems that underpin the city. Reduce the generation of waste, increase recycling, increase reuse, and then ultimately, which is a conversation that Councillor Nicola Beach is all over this, waste to energy. As well. So I can say that there is a very comprehensive conversation that is not just about straining gnats and swallowing camels. It's trying to grab a hold of the way the city actually functions at a very basic level.
Thank you. We move to Liberal Democrat question number 1. Councillor Varney on scooter parking. Councillor Varney, you have 1 supplementary question.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank Mayor Rees for his response to my question, although I am disappointed he was unable to give any details at all. My supplementary question is in fact the same one as I asked last time, which Mayor Rees failed to answer, so I thought I'd try again. So the question is, do you support the reallocation of car parking bays for Voi e-scooter parking? I believe this will solve the problem of pavement clutter and discourage users from riding on the pavement. Thank you.
I'm not going to get into a ping pong here, but as we're all adults in the room, I will just suggest it's not that I didn't answer the question, it's you didn't like the answer I gave.
No, you didn't answer it at all.
There's a subtle but significant...
Well, I don't know what your opinion is on this issue, on this question.
Councillor Varney, so. You've asked the question. Please let the Mayor answer now, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just saying there's a subtle but significant difference in the description. Yeah, I do support the use of car parking bays. But again, it's easy to make these kind of pronouncements when there's no responsibility for the consequences. And one of the things that we do have to look through is the impact on income. And Bristol City Council income is not an abstract. Bristol City Council income goes into Bristol City Council services that actually are there to make life better for people. So we can end up doing a good thing that has a negative impact in another area in which we wish to do good. So that's the consideration. But we've given some quite strict, we've asked our officers to take on some quite strict deadlines in coming back to us with a plan on how we work with Void to better manage the scooters. I mean, and obviously outside of that, the work on the private scooters, the lobbying, and on these private motorbikes that have now turned up, whipping around the streets as well. That work is obviously ongoing.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to Labour question 2, Councillor Hornchin, on mental health support for young people. Councillor Hornchin, you have 2 supplementary questions.
Thank you, Marvin Rees, for the answer to my question. What I wanted to ask you was, has there been any discussion with the schools about how they intend to support children's mental health?
Yeah, there has. And I mean, it's not a new conversation, but it certainly is a heightened conversation. And it actually began pre-lockdown. As soon as COVID began to take off, in March, we began convening head teachers and representing both secondary and primary, and we had nursery head representation also, to talk about the consequences of COVID for our young people. It's one of the reasons we're able to move so quickly on hunger and getting food out to kids, and particularly make our moves, as Helen Godwin led so well on the Easter hunger programs as well, and holiday hunger. It's one of the reasons we were able to move so quickly on digital inclusion and begin to mobilise the city around making sure that young people had devices and access to data. And certainly where the national programme to support schools was faulty, we were able to step up in some of those instances and support with our business community. But mental health was one of those areas. We were looking directly at the mental health of children and young people, but we were also looking at the related area, if you remember the work we did on domestic violence, anticipating an increase in domestic violence, children and young people being homes in which domestic violence was increased and was happening, the less likelihood of early interventions, because many of the interventions coming in through teachers noticing what's going on with their pupils, and the pupils reporting to teachers, and obviously that having an impact on children and young people as well. So there has been a very comprehensive piece of work going on with our schools.
The other one, the second question, was about communities before they get to the crisis point. Do you have any further details you might be able to share with us on the youth zone, and are the young people and children also consulted on this youth zone?
Oh yeah, the youth. We're not the first place to have a youth zone.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are 12 or so around the country at the moment. Very successful. I know that Helen's Godwin went up to have a look at one in Manchester. I think Paige in my office had a long chat with Helen Holland today, I believe. I think you had a chat on the phone. Who's a young woman from South Bristol as well, where the first youth home's going up, and she's been at the forefront of the program from the office. So engagement, making sure that it's fit for purpose, is in line with the hopes, ambitions, and needs of young people in Bristol. All that would be central to a successful rollout. As I made the point earlier on, I think there are, Bristol, I hope we have learned as a city that having a good idea in a room and imposing that idea on people that aren't ready for it is not necessarily a good recipe for success. So that early engagement and then working with people to make things like that happen is the best way of making it successful.
Thank you. Green question 2 is Councillor Edwards on resident parking zones, and you have 1 supplementary.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So thank you for your answer to my question. The Mayor suggests in the answer that the residents' parking zone entrenches car ownership, but I wasn't able to find any evidence to support that. But we do know that without residents' parking zones, we are getting car-dependent commuting, where areas such as mine are being used as car parks, and park and rides, and with the new Ashley Down station opening, there's a big concern that this is going to happen even more. So I'd like to ask the Mayor, could you possibly share that evidence or information that supports the idea that residents' parking zones entrenches car ownership?
So we're grappling with some challenges here and unintended consequences, and I think what we think are some really contradictory positions. So, you know, I've been lobbied quite vociferously over the time to plunge two-footed headlong, if I can do both things at the same time, into making car ownership inconvenient, right? That's been quite a position coming from, to dissuade people from using cars. And yet, residents' parking zones actually add convenience to car ownership. They make it easier to park. So what we've been struggling with is trying to work out what is the actual line here. Are we in the business of a city of making car ownership convenient? It's easy to park, so I'll have my car, even if I live in the middle of the city. And I'm not saying what position I hold here. I'm just saying, I'm trying to work out where you come from. I live in the middle of the city. It's active travel distance to the city centre, active travel distance to the train station, active travel distance to a new train station that's coming on, the coach station, the major retail employment, next to a main arterial road with bus routes. And then someone's advocating to make sure I'm guaranteed a parking space outside my house. That seems to me to be something that needs to be worked through as a matter of principle. You know, what is the nature? Unless, and this would be a challenge, unless the argument is we want to make car ownership inconvenient in an abstract and for people who come from outside the area, but not for people who actually live in my ward. And that would be a challenge because it would lack consistency in the principle which you claim to be advocating for. So we, as we've said a number of times, our approach will be much more focused on livable neighborhoods, because as an overarching principle, what they do is they prioritize active travel, pedestrians, and streets for people over car ownership in an absolute way. And I'd hope that that's a principle that you would support.
Thank you. Conservative question 2 is Councillor Weston. Councillor Eddy, are you?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As you remarked earlier, it's the first time we've been back in the chamber since the election, so obviously for many people this will be all new. But can I respectfully remind members it is convention to stand up during questions to the Mayor?
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. Councillor Weston, Conservative question 2 on 4G and 5G masts, and you have 2 supplementaries.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. If I may, supplementary to question 1. I understand where I suppose I'm going to ask both questions. I understand where the Mayor's coming from. There is no definitive list. However, I am sure from my own experience in our ward, Chris, my ward, where we had a provider come forward that wanted to put a 5G mast in the middle of a local park, like in the middle of the green. So I don't think they could have come up with a more prominent place unless they put it in the middle of the road. We then found out from the housing team, that they do contain a list of 4G masts that sits on top of a high-rise block. So there must be a list within the housing team, for example, of where these masts already are, and highways and parks. I understand there won't be a list for those that are on private land, but would it not be quite straightforward to get the list on where these masts are housed on council land? And the reason for that is providers that come forward with 5G have an obligation to try and use existing structures. But if we aren't able to point them to where the existing structures are, they're going to pick the easiest place to put it, and that's not always the best for the community.
I think that's quite reasonable, actually, Mark. I think what we may have fallen foul of there is someone making the perfect the enemy of the good. What we may not be able to do is come up with a absolute comprehensive list of everything, but just talking to Mike, we can certainly dive in and get what we can and have a kind of a living list, as it were, that we can build on as more information comes in. I think we got caught in the answer a little bit in pointing out some of the challenges that we don't totally control planning on, on that front, and things can happen through permitted development. But let's see what we can do.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, to the Mayor. No, I would agree. When we are dealing with, coming to my second supplementary, when we're dealing with these applications, and they're being proposed in an unsuitable spot, to be able to say, actually, you should go there, is quite convenient. And my second supplementary then is there actually is a definitive list. The problem is it's held by Ofcom. And Ofcom are refusing to release the list because of national security concerns. I'm not quite sure I hold with that, but they are. I just wondered whether there might be some cross-party work here to write to the Secretary of State for Media, Culture and Sport and say, actually, from a planning perspective, councils need to see that list.
I think we could do that cross-party. It would also be worth, if I can just make a note behind, maybe I can raise that with core cities as well, because we'll all be facing the same challenge. We do actually have a core cities away day on Friday, so I'll raise this as an issue there as to what they are, you know, what action they're taking, and if we could take action together.
That would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so Liberal Democrat question 2 is from Councillor Clark on the community bus scheme. And Councillor Clark, you have one supplementary.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Thank you for the response, Mayor. Whilst I appreciate that buses are now the responsibility of WECA, some of our communities in Brislington, such as the Hungerford estate, feel cut off and isolated from much of the city, and many of our residents do not have access to the private car, and walking to the A4 is not always easy. What I was rather hoping was to start a dialogue about community-led and community-designed buses. Bristol Community Transport provides such a service, helping older people and disabled people reach a variety of essential local facilities such as post offices, medical centres and shops. They are organised across the city and include places like Headley Park, High Ridge Uplands, Bedminster Down, Lockley, Southville, Ashton, Bedminster Down, Whitchurch and Stockwood. Can I ask if officers will work with myself and Councillor Varney to maybe extend some of the existing services to incorporate these areas in Brislington?
So what I suggest is a number of things. One is do have that conversation with Don Alexander, who's obviously Cabinet Lead for Transport. I think one of the powerful aspects to Don having that brief is in representing Avonmouth. He is representing an area that's vulnerable to disconnections in our transport services within the city as well, and he's a bus user himself. So please have that conversation with Don. I would suggest coming any councillor who wants to talk about the bus network and what the best would be for Bristol to use Don as a point of contact as well. And I would recommend that, yeah, there's Don sitting there, he'll push his button in a minute. I'd recommend that maybe Don offers a space for people to come and talk and get some of those ideas down. And just on the back of that, what I will do is work with Don and back Don to work through the combined authority, which we make up, which we have to talk about something over there, but we are the combined authority to make the case for the quality of bus services we require. But they clearly have the financial purse strings now for the subsidy of the routes, which obviously so many of the decisions will be through that structure that we have to work now. But Don, did you want to come in?
Stand up. Oh yes, thanks Marvin. Yeah. There are some challenges, as you say, working through the combined authority. There have been a few glitches with communications recently regarding the bus changes on the 29th of August. I met with Doug Claringbold this morning from First Bus to discuss that. And whilst we work on the governance of WECA and its implications for communications, I will also be hoping to set up a channel for councillors to speak directly to bus operators within the city so that we can have something of a forum whilst those wider issues are clarified. But yes, I will be happy to take that, and we will have a time to speak to Doug and the other operators ourselves at some point, because I think it's really important.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to Labour question 3 from Councillor Massey on food sustainability, and you have 2 supplementaries.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor, for your support for my ideas about growing edible food, plants and trees along some of the spaces we've got in Southmead. We've got quite a lot of green space, so I'm very happy with that. The only problem is, of course, that the trees that the council supplies are £300 a time, which is a lot of money for us to raise to pay for them. So we might have to look somewhere else for that. But thank you anyway, and I hope that when we get going, you'll be able to come along and plant the first tree for us.
Bit of tree planting won't go amiss. So yeah, make the invite. I'd love to be out there with you.
Thank you. We move on then to Green question 3 from Councillor Denyer on CEE bill, and Councillor Denyer, 2 supplementaries.
Thank you. Mayor, you've declined to support the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill on the basis that it's a private member's bill and not supported by the current government, so you think it won't pass. Even though the same was true of the private member's bill that eventually led to the Climate Change Act 2008, and even though other Labour council leaders have endorsed it. I think a lot of Labour voters might be disappointed to learn that you don't think it's worth proposing something just because the Tories won't agree to it. For the thousands of Bristolians who voted for you thinking that you'd provide some pushback to the Tory government, would you like to reconsider your previous refusal to support it?
I mean, I just anticipated this, and when I see your name, my heart often sinks, because it's the usual kind of, you know, chess game, trying to get a tweet or a blog out of the answer that feeds that line that you know, Labour Party don't care about the planet and I don't care about the planet and all that type of stuff, which is the only thing which is so just demoralising in the way you do politics. The truth is to look at what we've done within the city. Only this morning I was on a call with UK Cities Catapult and Greg Clark, in which the scale of ambition we've put in place around tackling climate change, our willingness to take on gritty issues such as how we build more densely and higher, which is going to be an issue, right? At some point, you've got to get off the gestures and actually do some real policy. How we take on the question of how we build more densely so that people live more efficiently with a lower carbon footprint and don't need to spread onto green space in an urban sprawl. The scale of ambition that we brought through with our climate strategy, being the first city to bring forward an ecological emergency, which is now an ecological action plan that we launched last week, that again, you spend your time telling everyone it's rubbish, and that's fine, that's your prerogative, but you know, we need people to turn up with some real ideas. All these things are testimony to what we actually have done on the environment and what we do on the environment. Our sentiment is it's a great piece of gesture politics, but actually we got to spend our energy doing stuff that really matters and is going to work, and that's what we've been doing. The major piece of work we've been doing in the lead up to COP that has already resulted in what we was told today, a fund of about over £250 million that will be made available to cities to pay for their decarbonisation in the face of the failure of national governments, and our own included, to come up with any plans that are costed, put against real dates, and located in real places. So the context is to look at what we're doing, and then sometimes to actually say, do you know what they're saying is actually true. They think this is just a gesture. It's not going to go through. Why spend your time on a campaign that has no outcome? And let's spend our energies on doing stuff that really matters, and that's what we're doing. I'm sure that won't satisfy you. I'm sure we'll read it in a blog from you later. Well, I won't read it, but someone will tell me about it. But, you know, that's our position, and you know, we're trying to get real stuff done.
Thank you. Have a second supplementary.
Thank you. Yes, I had a specific question about the fossil fuel treaty, which was my other question, but there doesn't seem much point asking that now. I acknowledge many of the things you just said are true, and that there's many good things that the council is doing on the climate, but alongside doing that, do you not think there's any merit in parallel asking the government to also go further?
We are asking the government to go further. We've been quite, I think one of the biggest holes in our approach to COP and climate change in general at this moment in time is not grand statements, it's money, right? And you'll see an article I've written, but I've said it publicly many times. one of the biggest dangers of COP is that we leave with a lot of T-shirts and banners and some big statements by national governments, but the statements are not attached to plans that are located in real places, real systems, attached to finance, dates, and measurable outcomes. That's the danger. And what we've been doing through the World Economic Forum and through our work with Greg Clark is working on how we build those financial vehicles. And I'm not going to embarrass anyone, but actually there are people reasonably close to you who've been involved in some of that too. So that is a very gritty piece of work that is about saying that at the moment, national governments can't seem to get out the traps in putting the finance in place. Right? We estimate in Bristol it's about £9.5 to £10 billion to decarbonise our economy. We haven't got that to hand. So how do we get that money? It's not coming from national government. So the work we've been doing is saying, well, how do we look at the existing vehicles of international finance where there is money looking to land places and reconfigure those vehicles so that cities can directly access them? And not just individual cities. We're doing this with core cities to come up with a collection of decarbonisation projects to give us the scale that international finance has said lacks when they deal with it, is missing when they deal with individual cities. But we're also talking about new financial vehicles. So HSBC, for example, has put $1 trillion towards green finance. But they're saying the problem is they can't get the projects at scale. They can't get the projects that are market ready so that they can come and invest. Now, if that $1 trillion was invested, it begins to decarbonise the economy. That is the biggest danger we face. And that's where we're lending our efforts, as a city right now. We're working on this closely with Glasgow, obviously the host city for COP. And we're part of a whole collaboration of including Greg Clark and core cities in terms of how we begin to access that finance. But you'll see that more of the city networks are now focused on finance. C40 have a full-time finance team now. Again, because it's not just about looking at yourself in a league table of best practice and sharing stories about community projects you've done. This is a wholesale reconceptualization, reinvention, rebuilding of our cities and its system. And it takes trillions upon trillions of dollars to do it. But we find ourselves in that piece of work. And on some occasion, if we can build some sort of relationship, I'd be more than happy to tell you about it and you maybe even get involved.
Thank you. Conservative question 3 is from Councillor Sharon Scott, who I think isn't with us at the moment. So we'll move on and come back as she arrives. Liberal Democrat question 3 is from Councillor Hartley on bike hanger procurement. Councillor Hartley, you've got one supplementary.
Thank you. Thank you for your written reply, Mayor Rees. I'm very glad that you've brought up the issue of cost of the bike hangers with the transport team. In your reply, you mention plans for further bike hanger installations. Can I ask, aside from the 12 to 20 hangers, where funding has already been granted under the Emergency Active Travel Fund Tranche 2 bid, how many bike hanger installations are currently planned?
Yeah, I'm going to get the number for you. I've actually just tasked the team with coming back by the end of November with taking into account the costs around the base and the bollards and all the rest of it. But to come back with that solid plan, Don and I have been talking about this with that rollout, right? And again, it has to be costed and all the rest of it and find the optimum locations. Since saying that, I've asked for it to come by the end of October, but people don't know that yet. They do now. So, yeah, I'll be able to come back to you outside of this with more solid numbers and dates. If you want to be involved, then stay tight with Don, over the next month and a half, and, you can be part of that solution.
Thank you.
Thank you. Labour question 4 is Councillor Rippington, who I understand isn't here today, so we'll move to Green question 4, Councillor Wilcox on school streets. Councillor Wilcox, you've got 2 supplementaries.
Thank you. So I note the answer about school streets, that's good, but I know that many schools have applied for school streets but have found the process very complicated, and some have even filled in the paperwork and been told that they can't have a full school street. Do you intend to make this process easier, and when will we see some changes, please?
We'll have to look at what the precise reasons for that. I mean, school streets are a fantastic idea and going to be a big part of our future, but they have to be done right because it is part of our highways. It's part of the ways people get down, and not all streets outside schools are appropriate for school streets. And so that's why we have experts in our transport policy to help us make those decisions. But certainly, as we go through the scheme, it should be in constant review. I do say to my teams, we should always be looking at what we've done, ask if we can make it easier, more accessible, cleaner, quicker, learning from previous experience, and I expect that to be done. I'll take those challenges back into the team now and ask if the whole process has been run as well as it possibly could have been.
Thank you. My question's not on the screen. And so my supplementary is to my second question about the bus changes. I'd like to know when Bristol Council found out about the changes that were released on the 29th, or programmed for happening on the 29th of August, and what steps did Bristol Council take to actually reverse them, please?
Well, reversing such decisions like that, not necessarily within our gift. Remember the world we are in. It's not the world we'd like to be in. We don't own the company. We don't control it. One of the prices of getting access to the additional money and local powers that we have done through the Combined Authority is to be part of the Combined Authority, and there's obviously a redistribution of decision making and channels through which we can influence our transport networks. In terms of the precise dates, I got some notes here, but I can't see it quickly to hand. I don't know, Don, did you have a precise date? We can get it to you if you'd like to know.
The changes in Bristol were to commercial services.
Yeah.
Normally, there would be a number of days, I think 70 days, which the commercial operator has to give.
He's asking when we knew.
When we knew.
Find out,
when I saw it in an email that someone sent to me, I think.
I'm sure we can get the date of that.
Yeah,
email.
I mean, we do have problems with communications with WECA, which are rooted in the governance.
Yeah, we'll get you the date of the email.
Thank you.
Thank you. Conservative question 4 is Councillor Morris, who's not with us at the moment, so we'll move to Liberal Democrat question 4, Councillor Clark, on Stockwood Open Space, and you have one supplementary, Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mayor, for the written response which you sent to me earlier on, and that actually answers my question in full. And it would be really good to be able to work and talk to officers about the possibility of a skate park in the Hungerford open space. So thank you very much for that information in advance.
All right, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I thank the Mayor for providing the answer. One question I have is in your answer, it refers to confiscating alcohol if there's a suspicion someone's going to behave antisocially. The actual public space protection order bans any consumption of alcohol, and my concern is that this will equally apply to someone who's being conscientious and just having a drink after work in Castle Park with a friend, as it will someone who's being antisocial. Is there the scope to review the public space protection order, or if not, repeal it altogether so it doesn't affect people who are being responsible whilst consuming alcohol?
Well, I'm just confirmed we wouldn't need to, because there'd be no grounds for the confiscation unless there is a suspicion of antisocial behaviour resulting. Okay. Yeah. But we again, happy to chat to you outside of here, but that's my implication. I feel like I should say something more.
Okay, thank you for that. And moving to your second question, my second question, I thank your answer for that as well. You mentioned earlier an away day with the core cities. I wonder if there's a scope to discuss with them and with the Scottish Government, who I know are in favour, about lobbying in favour of safe consumption rooms to try and get pilot schemes rolled out. Is that something you would consider doing?
Yeah, I would, and Ash has already reached out to government on this front and shared our interest in being involved in any pilots or being a forerunner city within the city. Certainly, when I go up to core cities, I can ask. It's probably also worth me just checking out where the LGA is. I sit on the LGA City Regions Board, and could probably do with just talking to our LGA officers about how they're supporting local authorities on this front.
Thank you. Green question 5 is from Councillor Fitzjohn on City of Culture. Councillor Fitzjohn, you've got one supplementary.
Good afternoon, Lord Mayor. In answer to your reply, as long as Bristol holds back from significant arts investment, funders like DCMS won't take the city seriously. They expect this to be a shared risk and to see ongoing commitment to this sector. I welcome the capital investment in Bristol arts infrastructure, but that is different to funding an ambitious citywide programme, raising the profile of the city and attracting new investment. You say our view that we are not in a strong position to win. That's not a great accolade to our arts organisations who are really struggling to get over COVID. So I ask you, what can we do now to give a message of hope to our arts organisations and people who really want to put Bristol on the arts map? Thank you.
I just think I'm within my circles, I always just tell people to be very careful just about the language we use to describe things. We're not holding back. I mean, you just got to look at the scale of investment in Bristol Beacon. Iconic arts venue in the city, that is far from holding back. There's some of the things we've done over the last year. I just made a little note, and this is just some of it. China 4 bid was a phenomenal success for our cultural creative sector in the city that led to the uniting of our TV and companies and our creative sector, and I would say brought a diversity to those meetings that has not been done before. We know that the TV sector is just dominated by, let's be frank about it, white middle class people, and natural history in particular is dominated by privately educated people. But actually, by Channel 4 coming here, we've been able to have and companies have really launched into recruiting a greater diversity of people into the sector. But it's a big boon for the city. We became a UNESCO City of Film when European Capital of Culture proved unavailable to us, and I went over and just after the Brexit vote and met Sepkovic. We bid, making the case, could we still bid for Capital of Culture? It was clearly not available to us. We switched to UNESCO City of Film. We won it as part of our Channel 4 bid. We've done, even out of great trial, look at Colston, right? There's an exhibition on there that is seen around the world. We launched the One City Poets. We have poets in the city for the first time. And we debated whether to give you the description, but the first poet was a black man of Jamaican heritage, second was a black woman of African heritage, the third is a gay man. I mean, inclusion in the creative sector, having a city poet that's commissioned to write poetry about the city and take poetry out to the city is an investment. The investment in Bottle Yard and the expansion of Bottle Yard Studios, was it 11, 12 million pounds? Again, huge investment in the creative sector. St. Paul's Carnival had been basically ground into the floor. And there had been some very poor leadership around that. Some people who have been some of the most vocal, advocates of the culture sector are actually involved in that. But we brought that back, supporting the Bedminster Lantern Parade, St. George's, the Old Vic. All this matters. We have not held back on Bristol's cultural sector. So I just gently say I think it's unhelpful language to suggest that. But remember too that culture, it fits within a broader suite of challenges within Bristol. When I once had quite an energetic conversation with the Arts Council, and they were saying, well, you need to invest more in culture, there was a protest going on at one part in the city. And I suggested to the person, I tell you what, why don't me and you go out, meet these protesters talking about homelessness, and you tell them that you want X million pound for your arts venue. See if it satisfies them. That's the reality of it. We're investing in culture. We're also dealing with a city with 1 in 5 of our kids are at risk of hunger every day. We've got the added addition pressures from COVID, in which the poorest and most vulnerable people have been hit first and hardest and will be least well placed to benefit from any economic uptick when it comes. And we got the the mental health legacy that was referred to earlier on. So it fits within a context. And I would just value the kind of conversations in this chamber in which actually we recognise those competing demands for limited resources and our need to behave responsibly with that money. But also a bit of an appreciation of the scale of investment and success there has been within our work with the culture sector in the city.
Thank you. We'll move now to Conservative question 5 from Councillor Leslie Alexander on electric scooters. Councillor Alexander, you've got 2 supplementaries.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for answering my questions. I have no supplementaries at this time.
Thank you. In which case, we'll move to Liberal Democrat question 5, Councillor Hartley on cladding. And Councillor Hartley, you have 1 supplementary.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your reply to my question, Mayor Rees. We all share your concern for residents who have been affected by the awful cladding scandal. In your response, you said, we continue to lobby national government and support resident-led campaigns, having completed or considered all suggestions from the motion. However, the first item of that motion, under the Council Resolves 2, was to sign up the Council to the End Our Cladding Scandal campaign. Upon inspection of the End Our Cladding Scandal campaign website earlier today, there is no mention of Bristol City Council, yourself, or any Bristol councillors. When will the Council fulfil the requirements of last December's motion?
Well, I'll have to have a look at, what's happened there. We clearly have been a part of the efforts to tackle the cladding scandal. Tom has written to government, has worked with Thangam. Well, I'll let you come in. Tom has worked with Thangam, so we'll have to find out about the motion. But, motions are good, actions are better, right? And what has happened in the city is action. But, Tom?
Thank you, Mayor. I will look into that. To be fair, I have publicly tweeted my support for the End Our Cladding scandal, and have also recently written to Robert Jenrick about the specific issues around the EWS1 form. As the statement that was put out by Robert Jenrick in July didn't actually reverse the formal advice note, and that is still in place, causing those problems with RICS, as you'll probably be fully well aware, and we'll be making further representations in due course.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move to Green question 6. Councillor McCarthy, I don't think, is with us. Conservative question 6. Councillor Windows. Councillor Windows with us? Not yet. And so Liberal Democrat question 6. Councillor Hopkins on the new Oasis School. Councillor Hopkins, you've got 2 supplementaries.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I fully recognise that trying to do a big job like this in a hurry is not easy. But if we'd actually started when we were raising...
Councillor Hopkins, I appreciate the requirement to stand up, but is there any chance you can either speak up a little or get a bit closer to the microphone, because it's a little difficult to hear you?
I appreciate that trying to produce this in a hurry is not easy, because if we'd started when we were raising the issue, we'd be 3/4 of the way there by now. I have fortunately managed to speak to the civil servant who's responsible for delivering this, and he seems to be open to persuasion. And of course, it's the quality of the argument that the City Council actually makes that is likely to get government support or not. And given the problem that we've now got with Temple Mead School not proceeding, certainly at the moment or in the near future, the position has become that much more urgent. Will the Mayor therefore reconsider and have a look at this matter again?
Well, any expertise you have to lend to solving this challenge, we'd gladly take you up on the offer, of it. Obviously, school delivery is a challenge. We can refer to the Temple Quarter. It's obviously tied up with flooding, the Environment Agency, and we did our bit, and there's been some objections to that, which causes us a challenge. And here too is something we have to work very closely with the DFE on. So not all the levers to make sure things move are in our hands, even though ultimately we are responsible. But yeah, as I said, you got some expertise to bring to the table. We'd gladly take it off you.
The first thing that would be useful is the correspondence where we've been asking government and lobbying them over a period of time that I've asked for and haven't actually got. What I will say as well with regard to the second question is that we identified between myself and Councillor Kent, the Hengrove councillor, new Fossway site. Now, the Oasis is given as a reason why it would be difficult for them to proceed to produce what we need. We're talking not here about a whole new school in a period of time, but we're talking about roughly 100 pupils in year 1 and 100 pupils in year 2. We've suggested a new Fossway site because that's right next to the existing Oasis school and will make it far easier for the Oasis to deliver. Can I confirm that that would not be blocked by this administration, because I know there are plans for housing there, which could take place later?
This is one of those situations where there's a statement's made, but we need to also think about the potential consequences of that. And it's a site that's been identified for housing. The anticipation is that homes could be given permission on that site in the relatively near future, but making a decision, taking a line at your suggestion, would actually mean the delay of delivering those homes. So I think in advocating for a position, we have to be full and transparent, not just about the position we're taking, but about the consequences of that position for other areas of delivery of the organisation, but for people's lives. On balance, I don't think that would be the best course of action for us at the moment, in terms of, especially in light of our need to deliver homes and the opportunities we have to make up for any shortfall in other ways.
Thank you. We're going to move on and take some statements for the last few minutes, but I was going to go back to Councillor Morris for Conservative question 4. Councillor Morris, did you have any follow-up to your question? You're entitled to one follow-up question.
No supplementaries. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. In which case, we'll move on to statements. I remind councillors who've submitted statements, you have 1 minute to speak to your statements, and we should have time to get a few of them in if people stick to that. Councillor Breckles was the first statement on threats to British democracy, if you want to speak on that.
Well, the statement I put in speaks for itself. We are having, automatic, having sort of required voter ID is going to exclude the poorest and most disadvantaged voters in this city. It's a direct attack on democracy. The Boundary Commission is only going to take note of registered electors, so people who aren't registered will be ignored in drawing up boundaries. The whole thing is, the whole democracy is being rigged, and you only have to look over the water in Wales. Not only are they introducing things like votes at 16, but they're also looking at making voter registration easier, which is exactly what we should be doing in this country. And they're also giving councils the option to opt for a single transferable vote to elect councillors, which should be a choice available to councils in England as well. It seems that we, people in Bristol, are going to have second-class rights when it comes to democracy, and a second-class chance to make their voice count.
That's 1 minute, Councillor Beckles. Thank you. I want to try and get some other people in. Second statement is from Councillor Varney on front garden trees. Councillor Varney, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I welcome Mayor Rees's pledge to double Bristol's tree canopy cover within the next 3 decades. However, according to the Bristol Tree Forum, it is currently diminishing, not increasing, so we clearly need to up our game. I recognise the fact that street trees are incredibly expensive to plant and suitable sites are scarce. That's why I've submitted a motion calling for a front garden tree scheme to be run by Bristol City Council. There are potentially many thousands of front gardens across the city which would provide suitable sites for tree planting with nearly all the benefits of street trees, but at a fraction of the cost. I'm delighted that the Bristol Tree Forum and the Campaign for Protection of Rural England have expressed support for this scheme. The Mayor of Bristol is very fond of telling us his door is always open to those who come to him not with problems but with solutions. I believe this proposal is one such solution to a very serious problem, and I hope the Mayor will prove his words are more than just empty rhetoric and give this idea due consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. I really don't want to rant about this, and I'll try to restrain myself today. I just bought my second electric car, so you can see that I'm fully committed to the cause. But I have to say that since travelling further afield and having to use public charging points, I truly understand the meaning of range anxiety. And it is interesting that we have a public question submitted today from a member of the public on a similar issue. I fully understand the sentiments of their question, asking about lamppost charging facilities, particularly in areas where there's not a lot of off-street parking. In the past, Councillor Varney and myself have spoken to council officers about the rollout of public charging points, but it is largely directed at charging points for taxi drivers rather than public use. I would like to call upon the council to essentially look at when they have planning applications in for private businesses like supermarkets and developers. Thank you. I'll be 2 minutes. No, not 2 minutes. I'll be 30. No, I won't be 2 minutes. I'm really sorry about that, Lord Mayor. Developers, if you can encourage developers to put in public charging points when we have applications coming in. Thank you. Rant over.
Thank you very much. Our next statement is from Councillor Hartley on St George's School site redevelopment. Again, Councillor Hartley, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The statement speaks for itself, but I wanted to emphasise that both I and the local residents of Brandon Hill hope that the Mayor and the Council can do whatever they can to ensure the educational nature of the St George's CV primary school site moving forward and look into the prospect of either nursery or send educational provision being used at the site, rather than yet more housing on this extremely important heritage area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor, statement number 5 is from Councillor Hopkins on secondary school places. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. One of the meetings we've had on this subject involved the last member for education, who was not unsympathetic and actually was quite knowledgeable on the subject. We've now lost her. Are we getting another one, or will the Mayor commit to coming to meetings himself so that we can hopefully make progress on this important subject?
Thank you. The next statement is Councillor Brown, who I don't believe is here at the moment, so we'll move to statement number 7. Councillor Denyer? Sorry. Your statement on fossil fuel non-proliferation. You have 1 minute.
That's all right. I don't need to speak to it. It was related to the question, but I submitted it in order to provide the Mayor with full contextual information to my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the final statement we have is from Councillor Townsend. Is Councillor Townsend? Oh, sorry.
So this is about asking the Mayor to pay particular attention to some of the SMEs in South Bristol that are being sort of kicked out really of where their units currently are because of the developments that are in White House Street and around Bedminster Green. They understand, and we understand the need for redevelopment, but what we don't want to do is put businesses and people out of jobs, because that's the position that White House Autos are currently in. So can you ask your economic development team to make some particular communications with them, please?
Thank you very much. All of the statements are noted, and that brings us perfectly to 5:30. So that's the end of this meeting. We will reconvene in half an hour's time at 6 p.m. for full council. Thank you.